Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into ethical hacking and InfoSec.
And we're using a really foundational book as our guide, John Erickson's Hacking, The Art of Exploitation.
Yeah, it's a classic. But we're not just reading from the book.
No, we're drawing insights from a recent conversation on the podcast, Uday J. Ojay,
Which translates to The Art of Hacking, a journey into the world of ethical hacking.
Right. It featured the host, Ahmed Said, and Dr. Samer Al-Khaldi, an information security expert, who are distilling their discussion for you.
Exactly. Think of this as, well, getting straight to the core technical ideas they talked about.
The aim isn't just talking about hacking tools,
No, it's about really grasping the principles, what makes exploits actually work.
And what's interesting about Erickson's approach and what they discussed is framing hacking as this: creative problem solving.
And needing a really deep understanding of how systems actually function, way down deep.
That's the key takeaway from the start. Understanding the guts of the machine, how the software and hardware interact, that's what empowers you in security.
Whether you're building defenses or, ethically testing them.
Precisely.
Okay, so the book kicks off maybe somewhere unexpected. Not with a big exploit, but with programming, specifically C.
Yeah, it might seem a bit like starting with grammar before writing, but it's fundamental.
Yeah.
C is deliberate.
Why C, though? What's special about it in this context?
Well, it's incredibly close to the machine language itself, the actual instructions the computer runs.
That close.
Oh yeah, it gives you very direct control over memory, over the hardware.
And as the experts on ASCII mentioned, so much critical stuff operating systems infrastructure is built with C.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So understanding C is like understanding the blueprint for a lot of the digital world.
And that closeness, that direct control, that's
Yeah.
where the security angle comes in.
Right. Fewer safety nets. When you're managing memory directly in C, mistakes can easily become vulnerabilities, exploitable ones.
Okay, so before breaking things, we need the building blocks. The book covers variables, functions.
And pointers. Pointers are really crucial here.
So variables are just named storage spots in memory, like labeled boxes.
Pretty much. Boxes holding data values. Functions are just bundles of instructions that do a specific job. Mini programs within the program.
And pointers. This is where it gets interesting for exploitation, right? They don't hold the data.
Correct. They hold the address of the data, the location of that box in memory.
Like a MAT reference.
Exactly like a map reference.
Right.
It tells you where the treasure is, not what it is. And controlling those map references, that's powerful.
For good programming, but also for finding or creating exploits by manipulating those addresses.
You got it. That direct memory access is a double-edged sword.
The book also mentions compilation and linking, turning human code into machine code.
Yeah, think of it like translation. You write in C, which humans can read.
Mostly read.
Right. Compilation translates that into object code. Sort of an intermediate step.
Still not runnable.
Not quite. Then the linker steps in. It pulls together that object code, adds any necessary library code, pre-written stuff, and bundles it all into the final executable file, the thing you actually run.
So why drag you, the listener, through all this programming groundwork? It's not just academic, is it?
Not at all. As Dr. Al-Khaldi stressed, you need these basics to get what's happening at the lowest level.
To see where the cracks might appear.
Exactly. To understand how a simple coding mistake can open a door for an attacker. Without this, exploits seem like magic.
Like watching a magic trick without knowing about misdirection.
Perfect analogy.
Okay, foundation laid. Now, the main event, the art of exploitation.
Right. Now we shift from building blocks to, well, finding the weaknesses in those blocks and using them.
Now, exploitation is basically taking advantage of a flaw, a vulnerability.
Yes, to make a system or program do something it wasn't designed to do, something unauthorized,
And that could be anything from just grabbing some data you shouldn't see.
all the way to gaining complete control, taking over the whole system.
And the book covers specific types. The discussion highlighted buffer overflows, format string vulnerabilities.
And code injection. 3 really key types.
Let's start with buffer overflows. That's the classic one, right? The liter of water in a half-liter cup analogy they used.
That's it, exactly. A program tries to stuff too much data into a memory buffer, a defined space.
And the extra data has to go somewhere.
It spills over into adjacent memory. And the danger is it might overwrite other important data. Or, crucially, it might overwrite the instructions telling the program what to do next.
Letting an attacker potentially redirect the program Make it run their code instead?
That's the goal of many buffer overflow attacks, yes.
Yes.
Hijacking the control flow.
Okay, then format string vulnerabilities. Sounds more technical. It's about print functions in C, like print.
Exactly. If a program carelessly uses input directly from a user as the formatting guide for print.
Instead of just printing the user's text.
Right. If the user's input becomes the format string, they can slip in special codes, like %, to peek at memory contents, or % to actually write to memory locations.
Wow, so they could potentially leak secret info or even change how the program runs just by crafting a weird input string?
Potentially, yes. It's a
Yeah.
subtle but powerful vulnerability if present.
And the third one, code injection. Sounds straightforward.
The name is, yeah.
Yeah.
But the how can be complex. It means finding some way to get your own executable code into a running program and then tricking that program into running your code.
Okay, so knowing these vulnerabilities exist is one thing. How do programmers actually prevent them?
Good question. For buffer overflows, the main defense is bounds checking.
Making sure you don't try to write past the end of the buffer.
Exactly. And using safer functions, like instead of strackaby, which just copies until it hits a null byte, use streaks by.
Which lets you set a maximum length.
Right. It adds a layer of safety.
And for format strings, how do you stop those?
The absolute rule is never use raw user input as the format string itself. Ever.
Always define the format string in your code.
Always. Like printf %, user input, the parens is your safe defined format. The user input is just data being formatted by it, not defining it.
Got it. So understanding these flaws really drives home the need for careful, secure coding.
Absolutely. Small mistakes can have big consequences. It makes you appreciate the security features we often take for granted.
Okay, let's shift now. How do these attacks happen over networks? Because that's where most threats live today, right?
Oh, definitely. Almost everything is network. So understanding network protocols, especially TCP/IP, is critical for security folks.
The experts on ISSOs talked about sniffing, spoofing, and redirection. Sniffing sounds like eavesdropping.
That's a good way to put it. Intercepting and looking at data packets flowing across a network.
Useful for debugging networks, I guess.
Yes, but attackers use it to grab unencrypted sensitive stuff, passwords, credit card numbers, especially on, say, public Wi-Fi.
Which is why that little padlock icon, HTTPS, is so important.
Crucial. HTTPS encrypts the traffic between your browser and the website. Makes sniffing much less useful for the attacker.
Okay, packet spoofing. Faking data packets.
Yeah. Crafting packets so they look like they came from a trusted source
Why do that?
to bypass security filters, maybe? Or flood a target with fake traffic to knock it offline, a denial of service or DOS attack?
And network traffic redirection, actively messing with the data flow.
Right, things like ARP spoofing on a local network. An attacker tricks devices into sending traffic through their computer instead of the real router.
So they can intercept or even modify the communication?
Exactly. That's the classic man-in-the-middle attack scenario.
Yep.
Imagine someone doing that in a coffee shop with public Wi-Fi.
Scary stuff. So practical tips for listeners to stay safer online.
Well, the basics are still the best. Always look for HTTPS on important sites.
The padlock.
The padlock. Use a VPN, a virtual private network, on public Wi-Fi. It encrypts everything.
Good advice.
And keep your stuff updated. Operating system, browser, everything. Patches often fix network vulnerabilities.
Okay, so an attacker exploits a vulnerability, maybe over the network. What's often the next step? What payload do they deliver? That brings us to shellcode.
Right. Shellcode is usually the payload. It's a small chunk of machine code, often written in assembly language.
Assembly, that's really low-level stuff.
Very low level. The goal is usually to get a command prompt, a shell, on the victim's machine.
And getting a shell means you can basically type commands and run programs on that machine remotely.
Pretty much full control, yeah, as if you were sitting there. But writing shellcode isn't easy.
Why not?
You need deep knowledge of the target system's architecture, its assembly language. The code has to be tiny, often.
To fit through the vulnerability.
Exactly. And it often needs to be position independent. It has to run correctly no matter where it lands in memory.
They also mentioned avoiding null bytes and dealing with non-executable stacks.
Yeah, null bytes can be tricky because many exploits involve manipulating strings, and null bytes terminate strings in C, so the shellcode itself can't contain them. And non-executable stacks, or NX bit DEP, are a defense mechanism. The system prevents code from running in memory areas meant just for data, like the stack. Attackers need ways around that.
Like that return-oriented programming, ROP, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Stitching together existing code snippets.
Precisely. using existing bits of legitimate code called gadgets to perform malicious actions, like ransom notes made from newspaper clippings.
Clever. What kinds of shellcode are common?
They probably covered port binding and connect back.
Port binding, it opens a port.
Yeah, the shellcode makes the victim machine listen on a specific network port. The attacker then connects to the victim to get the shell.
And connect back.
That's the opposite. The shellcode makes the victim machine connect out to the attacker's machine. Useful if a firewall blocks incoming connections to the victim.
Understanding shellcode really highlights why defenses like DEP and ASLR are so vital.
Absolutely. DEP tries to stop shellcode execution directly. ASLR makes it harder to even find the right place to jump to or inject the code. And IDPS systems try to detect or block the shellcode coming in.
Which leads us nicely to countermeasures, how systems fight back.
Exactly, making the attacker's job much, much harder.
They mentioned stacked canaries. That sounds interesting, like a bird in a coal mine.
Sort of. It's a known random value placed on the stack near the function's return address. Before the function returns, it checks if the canary value is still intact.
And if it's been changed.
It means something, probably a buffer overflow, overrode it. The program then usually just crashes safely, preventing the exploit. It detected the overflow.
Smart. And we mentioned ASLR, address space layout randomization. Remind us why that's a big deal.
It randomizes the memory locations of key things like libraries, the stack, the heap, every time a program runs.
So the attacker can't reliably predict addresses.
Exactly. Exploits often rely on knowing where specific code or data will be. ASLR makes that knowledge unreliable, breaking many common exploit techniques.
Then there are IDS and IPS, intrusion detection and prevention systems. What's the main difference?
An IDS watches the network or system, and if it sees something suspicious, it raises an alarm, tells someone about it.
Just detects.
Right. An IPS also detects, but then it tries to actively block the threat. It might drop malicious packets, block an IP address, reset a connection. It intervenes.
So these defenses sound pretty strong, but as they likely said, nothing's perfect.
No silver bullet. Security is layered. Attackers find ways around one defense, so you need multiple defenses. That's defense in depth.
Makes sense. If one layer fails, hopefully another catches it.
That's the principle.
Okay, final technical area. Cryptology, the science of secrets. How does this fit in?
Oh, it's fundamental. Cryptography gives us confidentiality, keeping data secret, integrity, ensuring data isn't tampered with, and authentication, proving who you are.
Essential for almost everything online.
Absolutely.
The experts likely discuss symmetric versus asymmetric encryption. Quick difference.
Symmetric uses one shared secret key for both encryption and decryption. Fast, efficient, like AES. Think of a shared padlock key. Asymmetric uses two keys. A public key to encrypt, a private key to decrypt, like RSA. You can share the public key widely, like an open mailbox slot, but only the private key owner with the mailbox key can decrypt.
Got it. And hash functions, used for passwords?
Yes, among other things. A hash function takes input data and creates a fixed-size fingerprint, the hash. It's one way you can't get the original data back from the hash.
So websites store the hash of your password, not the password itself.
Good ones do, yes. When you log in, they hash what you type and compare hashes. Much safer if their database gets stolen.
Of course, the book also looks at breaking encryption cryptanalysis.
You have to understand how things can be broken to build them stronger. They probably mentioned attacks like the one against old WEP Wi-Fi encryption.
Yeah, the FMS attack.
Right, showing weaknesses in the algorithm. Or techniques to speed up guessing passwords, like using common password patterns or pre-calculated tables.
So this whole journey through the book, filtered through that expert discussion, gives a really solid grounding. What's the big takeaway?
I think the most important thing is ethics. This knowledge is powerful. It's for defense, for understanding, for building secure systems. It should never be used maliciously. That's paramount.
And for listeners wanting to learn more, where should they start?
Like Dr. Al-Khaldi said, focus on the fundamentals first. Understand programming, networks, operating systems deeply. Don't just jump to using tools without knowing why they work.
That deep understanding is the real skill.
It truly is.
Okay, so as we wrap up, here's something to think about. We see attacks and defenses constantly evolving, this back and forth race. But beneath all that, what fundamental principles about system design, about maybe even human behavior, ultimately shape how secure or insecure our digital world actually is? Something to mull over.